On today's show, the Hawks win a pretty ugly basketball game on the road on this Friday evening, but a win is a win is a win is a win, as they say in the NBA world. So we'll get into all of what transpired, Dejounte Murray's big game with 41 points, and much more, and all of that is on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1670 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening, deep into the night here into Saturday in mid-March. And today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, and they help you to find qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and help you find them faster and do it for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. Also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make it your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks, and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We're also on YouTube, and again, anywhere you find your podcast on the audio side. In today's show, we'll focus on what became a interesting win for the Hawks, 99-92. That score is indicative of this game in a lot of ways, and we'll talk about it more as this podcast goes along, but certainly not the most aesthetically pleasing basketball game I've ever watched in my life. In fact, one of the least probably for a while, but with the win, the Hawks now lead the Nets again by 4 games in the standings, even with those 2 gross losses last week in Brooklyn, and another completely injury-riddled game, the third consecutive injury-riddled game for the Hawks that also led to 3 straight wins, so that's all that matters to Atlanta. This is probably the worst one yet in terms of the opponent availability and the Hawks availability, now that Jalen Johnson was also out in this game. But on the court, on the positive side, the headliner was Dejounte Murray with a career high, matching up a career high with 41 points. He was the centerpiece of the offense by a large margin in this game. It still wasn't easy, though. The Hawks were down by 14 points in the first half. It was tied at halftime after a nice sort of bounce back from Atlanta. They were up as many as 12 points in the second half, and then Memphis clawed back. It was a close game down the stretch. The Hawks were up by 1 point at one point in the fourth quarter. It was certainly a nip-and-tuck game in the fourth quarter, but in the end, enough offense and Grizzlies not really being able to score at the highest level that led to the win for the Hawks. And a win is a win, as I said before on the podcast, and they're now 29-34 this season. Not satisfying at all, but a nice little mini win streak here for the Hawks, including a road win. Our friends at FanDuel actually made the Hawks favored in this game by 3.5 points. Now, on the surface, that would sound insane. The Hawks were without 4 key players, including their best player in Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, who's certainly a top 3 guy on the roster, Okongwu, who's probably their best center, at least one of the best centers at this point in time, and then Kobe Buffkin. We'll come back to those guys, by the way, later on with some broader injury updates that were released in between our last podcast and this one. But with all you know that, is that the Hawks are without those 4 players, and they're on the road, it would be pretty surprising for them to be favored against pretty much anyone. But the Grizzlies have essentially a comical roster setup right now. They've had a rough year on all fronts, but especially with injuries. John Morant was suspended, now injured. Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart. 3 of their top 4 players are out for the season, essentially. And the Grizzlies are not very good on the whole as a result of that. But still, it was even worse in this game. They had 10 guys out. 10 guys out in this game. Morant, Bane, Smart, Luke Kennard, G.G. Jackson, Zaire Williams, Brandon Clark, Derrick Rose, Yuta Watanabe, and Scottie Pippen Jr. were all out. They had 9 active players in the game. You have to have 8 to start the game. So they had 9. One of which, Trey Jemison, has only been in the league for a hot second. Jordan Goodwin, who started at point guard for the Grizzlies in this game, was on a 2-way contract, still is actually, and was inactive the previous 2 games. They were essentially about as rough of an NBA situation as it possibly could be. They do have Jaren Jackson Jr., but he was the only guy in the top 7 or so coming into the year for Memphis. You could say Santi Aldama was at least part of their top 10 coming into the year, but I would argue, 2 of their top 10 players on their roster played in this game. So that kind of tells you, I'm not trying to pile on the win because it's still a win for the Hawks, and that's all that matters in the end. But context purposes, the Hawks didn't play particularly well in this game, other than Murray, who was very good. But in the end, I started with the details and all of that because it was an unavoidable aspect of what a brutal game this is to watch. Memphis did the smart thing. They mucked the game up. They made it physical. Taylor Jenkins knew, I'm sure, coming into the game, by the way, former Hawks assistant Taylor Jenkins, that they were at a talent disadvantage. Even with the Hawks so banged up, they were still the healthier and more talented team in this game. We'll talk about Dejounte more in a second, and he was clearly the number one aspect on the offensive side of the game for the Hawks, but it was probably the least appealing game of the year so far for Atlanta. When you throw in all the injury stuff, the style of play, the officiating was letting a lot go in this game. Two teams that scored less than 100 points. It was pretty rough. Anyone around the team would tell you that the win is all that matters, and I would agree with that if you are from that perspective. But as far as it was a forgettable game. I'm sure that some podcasts would probably skip this one. I don't skip really anything. If I'm available to do a podcast, I'm going to do it. People were telling me during the game, just skip this one. I don't want to do that. But we'll start with the defense first, and this might be a little bit shorter on the game side, but there's still plenty of stuff to talk about, as always, on the show. It was an incredibly slow-paced game. And when I say that, there were very few possessions in this one. Just not a lot of transition, not a lot of just fast-flowing offense in this game. The Hawks had actually allowed a 106 defensive rating, which is still very good, but that's actually way more than you would expect for a 92-point performance from Memphis. So that kind of tells you how slow this game was played. Again, hard to ignore that Memphis has essentially about as rough offensively personnel as you possibly could imagine. Yeah, I think defensively, they were at least a little bit better. Guys like Lamar Stevens, who are defensive stopper types, John Conchar, they had decent, William Gabriel, who they just signed, are decent enough defenders, but offensively, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good player. He is very much overtasked as the primary option on offense. It became clear during the game. Memphis had two quarters that actually had 20 points or less in this game. They shot it okay from three, didn't take a lot of threes in this one. Where the Hawks struggled defensively, in one area, it was fouling. They allowed 30 free throw attempts in a game that only had 87 possessions. So that's a very, very, very high free throw rate. Fortunately, Memphis missed 8 free throws, or the game would have been a little bit closer. But everywhere else, it was pretty solid. It's kind of hard to tell, even if I watched this game twice, it's kind of hard to tell how good the Hawks were defensively, but they executed at a fairly decent clip. And their current personnel, I guess without Jalen, this is not really as true as it has been, is generally better defensively. At least, missing Trey certainly helps on defense for the most part, just because they're playing a little bit bigger. Without Jalen, that doesn't really hold because they were playing Vit Krejci some in this game. He's not a great defender by any means, but the Hawks did a good job defensively. I don't know if it was great or dominant. It certainly wasn't hold your team to hold the opponent to 92 points great. But given the fact that Memphis was so limited, once they figured out a plan to kind of slow Jackson, who was hot at the start of this game, it was better, and the Hawks did a good job defensively in this one. On offense, it was essentially Dejounte Murray and a bunch of prayer for the Hawks. It was pretty clear from the outset of this game that Memphis had no one that could contain Murray, which is obviously a good problem to have if you're problem if you want to say if you're the Hawks. Memphis was playing again. I mentioned this before, but their starting point guard in this game is Jordan Goodwin, who's on a 2-way contract. He had no chance to defend Dejounte. Dejounte got to his spots all night long. That's a credit to him. He's very good at that. And with that said, and with Dejounte also shooting the ball well from the perimeter, that combination made it to where he got great looks all night and made them and had 41 points. So that's obviously number 1, 2, 3, 4 on the offensive review of this game was that Dejounte was great. The overall picture is pretty crazy because, Dejounte having 41 points on high efficiency in this game, the Hawks still did not even sniff league average offense. They had 99 points. So they would have been in dire straits if Dejounte had not shot the ball well. Because, he would have had usage no matter what. But even with him having, one of his top 3 games of the year offensively in terms of shooting and scoring combined, the Hawks still struggled on offense a lot in this game. No one, that was not Murray's fault. No one else on the team, other than Dejounte, who took more than 4 shots. So basically, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 other guys on the team took at least 5 shots, other than Dejounte. None of those guys shot better than 43% from the field. So no one shot it well other than Dejounte. But the Hawks did shoot well from 3 in the game. Other than Saddiq Bey, everybody else is pretty good from 3. Bogey 3 of 6. Dejounte, of course, hit 6 threes. Hunter is 3 for 6, and Garris Max was 2 of 3. So they shot 43% from 3. And if not for that, they also would have been in some trouble. They also had a good night on the offensive glass, mostly Capela, but some other guys mixed in. And, they only really had one good quarter of offense, and it was the third. But Dejounte was certainly consistent and highly prolific in this game no matter what. Played great on offense. And everybody else did enough, but they still had some struggles. Bay was 1 of 12 in this game. Capela missed a bunch of shots around the room in the first half. Krejci was 1 of 5 from the field. It was a bit of a struggle, but in the end, it was enough. So I would certainly encourage you to do this. I would not take really much of anything from this game. I've already seen some kind of unhinged and wild takes about this. The Hawks have won three in a row. That they certainly have. They're playing, I don't even know if it's that well, but they're playing well enough to win, and that's all that matters. But as far as like this opponent, this situation, they got to win. That is the only thing that really matters, other than Murray having a big game, and certainly that's the headliner of this game in a lot of ways. But as far as analysis is concerned, these two teams were so banged up. The quality of play was so not great in this one that I would kind of just leave it in a box. And obviously, there's player stuff you can take away, as we'll talk about later on. But I wouldn't react much to this one in any direction other than it was a nice win for Atlanta. Okay, we'll get into more of how it unfolded in a second, as well as the injury updates later on in the podcast about Jalen Johnson and Okongwu and Kobe Buffkin, etc. And generally the more deep analysis on this contest. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors and our partners over there at eBay Motors. Have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy basketball picks each week, all season long. Whether you're preparing for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire in your league every week, we'll actually have some players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster provided by Josh. So let's see this time around who Josh has picked out for us in this week's edition of eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Basketball Picks of the Week. And as always, there's a full list of guys from Josh to highlight, but we'll focus on one of them, and that is Minnesota Timberwolves forward Kyle Anderson. Karl-Anthony Towns, unfortunately, is going to be out for quite some time with a knee injury, and Kyle Anderson's in line for more playing time as a result of that in Minnesota. He played 28 minutes in the game that Towns left, and then also played even more than that in his first game without Towns on Thursday. And he does note, Josh does, that Minnesota is only playing 2 games next week, so keep that in mind for planning purposes in your fantasy basketball leagues. But Anderson checks a lot of boxes on the court. Not like to be a huge scorer by any means, but likely give you a lot of assists for a forward, also about a steal per game, and again, lots of playing time in the near future. Not super sexy as far as fantasy value, but Anderson is undervalued in Josh's eyes, and that's all about what it is in the fantasy basketball world. In fact, Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball knows going to help you winning out your championship teams this year in fantasy basketball leagues. And eBay Motors knows a lot about championships, and they know that it's all about each player being a perfect fit for your roster. It's the same for your vehicle. I'm on the road a lot for work, going to Hawks games, etc., all over the place. And there have been times where I should have to find an upgrade for my car, or even just to find something of a fix of a part or two, keep things running and on schedule. eBay Motors is the best place possible to do all of that stuff. They have over 122 million parts for your number one ride to make sure that everything with your car or truck stays running smoothly. They have brake kits and LED headlights, bumpers, roof racks, whatever vehicle happens to need. eBay Motors will have it covered for you. eBay Guaranteed Fit as well. It's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you are burning rubber, and crucially, you are not burning any cash. Keep your ride or die alive right now at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, let's dive back into how this game unfolded. It was a bit of a surprise, at least not only to me, but to other people. Vit Krejci started this game, which, that's obviously tied to DeAndre Hunter. So I said this before the game, and it was, I think, proven out to be the case. It wasn't like Quinn woke up today and thought that Vit was one of his specified players. People always kind of make that mistake about starting lineups sometimes, but it's like, well, this guy is better than this. No, Hunter is limited on minutes, which I talked about a lot on Wednesday. We don't have a definitive number, but he has not played more than 29 minutes in any game since he came back. And on Wednesday, Snyder admitted that he is on a restriction. So essentially, in order to have him close the game and play high leverage minutes, they chose not to start him, which made perfect sense to me. What it really told you about Krejci starting was that they thought more of him than they did of, Dylan Windler, who they just signed, or maybe Wes Matthews. That was what it meant in this game. They played Vit more. He was fine. But, it made some sense not to start Hunter on the restriction because you want to have either him or Bay on the court at all times. They're very small without Jalen Johnson, etc. But it was basically only that, they kind of liked Vit more than Windler and Matthews in this game. Memphis started this game off well. I said it earlier, Jaren has 7 points in the first couple of minutes. The Hawks were down by 14 in the first quarter at one point. By the way, Bogey had 3 in the first quarter. They gave him 1,000 points for the season. That's the first time in Bogey's career that he's ever scored 1,000 points in a year. Which sounds crazy because there's still a long season to go at this point. But Bogey has been healthy all year. Knock on wood, he's only missed 2 games this season. So him playing a lot of minutes and playing a lot of games has leading to his most prolific season so far in his career. But Murray had it going early on. He had an 8-2 run by himself. He had 8 points in 3 possessions, back-to-back threes. 4 of the first 5 shots of the Hawks were threes in this game. That kind of continued the entire way. In fact, the Hawks did not shoot well from 2 in this game. Roster-wise, rotation-wise, no huge surprises. I mentioned Beat starting, but it was Hunter, Garrison Matthews, and Bruno coming in together. And that's kind of been the case for a while now since Trey went out. They went a little bit deeper in the first half. They played Wes Matthews for 5 minutes. He didn't come back in. I thought he was fine in his 5 minutes, but it didn't do much of anything there. And then Trent Forrest was the backup point guard with Kobe on the shelf. They were down 11 at the end of the first quarter. The Hawks were 8 of 25 from the field with 0 free throw attempts in the first quarter. Murray had 12 points, and that was kind of it. Bay and Hunter were 0 of 8. Capela had a rough start in this game. A couple of forced shots he didn't need to do. Should have passed it out a little bit more than he did. And also, I said it before a little bit, but I'll say it more clearly now, especially in the first quarter and a half, maybe the whole first half, the officiating was interesting. I'm not even saying it was like one-sided, because I don't think it was, but they didn't call really anything in the first quarter, and that favored Memphis. Because Memphis was trying to muck the game up, they were trying to play physically, and they did a good job of that, and they were playing extremely physical in that first quarter, and they got away with it. After that, a lot more whistles, and it kind of evened out a little bit from there, but alas, that was kind of a key talking point in that first quarter. Murray stayed hot. He had 17 of the first 26 points for Atlanta in this game. The rest of the team, after the first 16 minutes, Murray had 17 points. The rest of the team was 3 of 24 from the field. So it improved from there, but man, rough. They were within 4. There was actually a 9-0 run by the Hawks late in the first half to kind of stabilize things, get back within in touch, and it was tied at halftime. Really ugly basketball in a lot of ways, but they bounced back from the deficit. Murray had 21 in the first half. Memphis scored 15 points in the second quarter, and that was a microcosm of what was to come. There was a hilarious back and forth in the beginning of the second half where there were 3 runs, basically. The Hawks had an 11-2 run, with Capela having his best stretch of the game at 7 points in quick succession. Memphis just couldn't make a shot. And then, after a timeout, the Grizzlies scored the next 9 points. They had back-to-back threes. They tied the game. And then after that, it was a 12-0 run by the Hawks. So it was literally 11-2 by the Hawks, 9-0 by the Grizzlies, 12-0 by the Hawks. That was the stretch of the first 6 minutes or so of the third quarter. And this doesn't usually happen, but the Hawks, there was a stretch, that stretch basically was about 7-ish minutes. The Hawks won it by 12 points. And they also allowed a 9-0 run in that stretch. Hard to do. At any rate, the Hawks led the rest of the game from there, but it wasn't comfortable. The offense did not cover itself in glory with Murray off the court for about 3.5 minutes in the fourth quarter, but they only lost that stretch by 1 point because they played good defense in that stretch. Hunter was fouling. He had 5 fouls after his first 20 minutes on the floor in the game. It was a fittingly ugly stretch, I thought, in the fourth quarter, where both teams had some turnovers and some sloppy play and passes and dribbling. 4 missed free throws in a row between Hunter and Jaren Jackson Jr. And then after that, the Hawks were, a little bit of comfort, I guess, when Murray hit another 3, but Memphis got to 2 with 3 minutes to go. Sorry, about 4 minutes to go. From there, it was kind of back and forth. The Hawks were scoring enough, but not with consistency. There was one sneaky important challenge in this game. Murray missed a shot. It was called out of bounds off of Capela. Clint knew it right away. He's not the kind of guy, if you watch the Hawks' reactions to challenges, it's usually not Clint gesturing the circle sign to try to get the challenge. But that time, he knew it right away and made the gesture to Quinn, who followed his advice, challenged, won the challenge, got the ball. They didn't score, but it was just some extra time. And then Murray hit a big shot to go up by 5 with about 2 minutes to go. He did miss the next one. The Grizzlies just couldn't make a shot, man. I mean, they missed back-to-back threes on the next possession. That would have been interesting. The second one was wide open, and it didn't fall. The Hawks were up by 5 with about a minute to go. And crucially, they didn't score on the possession. But Bogey and a little bit of Murray, but it was Bogey at the end of the possession. They did a great job burning the whole shot clock. And when you're up 5 in that spot, if they're not going to foul you, it's almost better. I shouldn't say better, but it's almost as good to just burn the whole shot clock as it is to score. Because it was literally half of the remaining time of the game. The Hawks held the ball and didn't score, but they burned the clock. So you're still up by 5 with 25 seconds to go. And as long as Memphis doesn't play perfectly from there, you're going to win. And then the Grizzlies tried a quick 2. Jackson drove on Capela, and I thought Capela did a great job on that play. He stonewalled Jackson, forced a tough shot that he missed, got the rebound, got fouled, and then Clint made both free throws. Actually, he was 5 of 5 from the line in this game. There you go. And that was it from there. So in the fourth quarter, I gave the numbers earlier for the whole game. In the fourth quarter, the Hawks scored only 19 points. They shot 6 of 20 from the field in the fourth quarter, aka crunch time, in a close game. That's usually going to get you beat in a lot of ways. But the Grizzlies couldn't score. They only had 20 points of their own, and the Hawks also were 4 of 6 from 3. So they were 2 of 14 on twos in the fourth quarter. But the 4 threes were big. Murray hit a couple. I think Bogey hit one, etc. And it was enough. Like, I don't want to overstate it too much, but this is not going to be a game that anybody sends the film to Springfield, unless Murray, because of Hall of Famer. Other than that, it was a tough scene. But the Hawks held on. I mean, they did lead, I believe, for the final. I'm trying to do the math in my head now. They probably led for the final, I don't know, 17, 20, something like that minutes of this game. It was down to 2 a couple times. It was down to 1 very briefly in the fourth quarter, but they never lost the lead. Murray made a bunch of shots, and they executed well enough despite the ugly shooting inside the arc in this contest. Oh, by the way, on that front, they actually shot worse from 2 than 3, which I failed to mention earlier. They were about 42% from 2 in the game. But they shot 43% from 3, and that was enough to override that. So we'll leave it there for now. We'll have more coming up in a second on the player evaluations, including injury updates. But first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the roles that you have to offer, and that's why you should check out LinkedIn Jobs. They have tools that you're looking for to find the right professionals for your team. They do it faster, and they do it for free. I'm on the hunt many times to hire people for my day job, and the folks at LinkedIn Jobs have been huge in making the entire process easier and more efficient. They know that small businesses are often wearing a ton of different hats, and they might not have time or resources needed to hire in the best possible way. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the easiest and best possible place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, and they do all of that while making the process both easy and intuitive. Hiring is much easier when you have that many qualified candidates. It's so easy that 86% of businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours with LinkedIn Jobs, and they're also helping you find ways to make the process easier for you. And 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for hiring purposes. Post your job for free by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnba. One more time, that is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. All right, and before we dive into the player stuff from this game, some injury updates that were crucial on Thursday in between podcasts. So first, Jalen Johnson, of course. Everyone was holding their breath all day on Wednesday into Thursday after he had the ankle injury in the third quarter against Cleveland. It didn't look great. Obviously, he was in some severe pain. That was very clear. The update is relatively vague from the Hawks. It seems like it's a positive update. I will say that. I wouldn't say definitively that, but the x-rays were negative. That's a positive. He didn't break anything. That's good. Right now, it's a right ankle sprain. That's all the Hawks have said. I was surprised they didn't announce this. Any MRI results, just an X-ray. Officially, he's listed as day-to-day. That doesn't really mean that he can be back in any day, but it could. The Hawks are, I think, purposely vague here. Some teams will be a little bit more specific on injury stuff, like ankle sprains in particular. Like there's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 is severe. They didn't say anything about that, so we'll see. But the day-to-day is probably a positive. He didn't travel to Memphis. It was only a 1-game trip, so the Hawks are back at home on Sunday. I would be a little surprised if he played on Sunday, but we'll see. I don't know. They were as vague as possible, so that's kind of where we have to leave it right now. At the very least, he's not like they didn't immediately say he was going to be out for a long time. There is a wide range on ankle sprains. I will always say that. Sometimes they can linger. Sometimes Bay had one this year where he played. I think the next game, or maybe he missed 1 game. So it could be quick. It could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 1 game. We'll see on Johnson, but everybody's holding their breath still. But it certainly wasn't the worst news, which is all that I can say for definitively right now. On Kobe Buffkin, of course, he finally got the rotation after Trey's injury, but now he actually missed his 3rd straight game tonight with the toe injury. He had an MRI earlier this week, and the Hawks are saying that he has a left big toe sprain at this point. We knew already he was in a walking boot. I saw him on Wednesday in that boot at the game at home. But he'll be in it for approximately 9 more days now. So they said 10 days yesterday. He'll be in the boot for that long. That means he's not going to probably play at all on the West Coast trip in all likelihood. I guess he could at the very end, but usually, you don't get out of the walking boot that day and then play. So I think he'll probably be out for the trip. He might go on the trip. We'll see. But no timeline for the return, only the 10 days in the walking boot. But I would guess he's going to be out for at least 2-ish more weeks, and TBD from there. That's obviously a little bit, it's brutal news. Buffkin's, like, as far as like impacting winning right now, it isn't the biggest loss. Obviously, Trey, Jalen, Onyeka are all bigger losses. But Buffkin is a future piece, and he was showing nice flashes, and you want him to be healthy. So we'll see, and he'll be out for a little while, it seems like. But I will say, Trent Forrest is playing pretty well in his absence. To Okongwu, the last update before this one that actually came out yesterday was on Saturday, February 24th, and that is when they gave the reevaluated in 2 weeks, quote unquote. Now he is out of the walking boot that he was in, and he'll be reevaluated again in 7 to 10 days. So, as always, reevaluation does not mean return. And as I said, 2 weeks ago, basically, he was never going to play in 2 weeks. That was never happening. Reevaluation does not mean return. We'll see from there, but the reevaluation period of 7 to 10 days would be during the West Coast trip. So I don't know if he's going to go on the trip or what will happen there, but he's going to be out for at least another couple of weeks, it seems like. And hold your breath on that one. I said at the time it wouldn't have stunned me if he missed the rest of the season. I think he probably will play, but we'll see on that. Like it's getting late early. Only like 5 more weeks left in the season at this point in time, 4.5, 5. So hold on tight, but he'll be reevaluated again in about a week and a half at this point in time. I got some questions about Trae Young, by the way. He was not on that update. There's no reason to update anything on Trae right now. We're still 2 more weeks until he's actually supposed to be reevaluated. It was 4 weeks after the surgery, and he had the surgery about 2 weeks ago. So still in the cast. He's on the trip. He's all that stuff. He's around the team, but nothing really to update there. He's still in the cast. They won't be looking at it again for about 2 more weeks. And anyway, those are the 4 guys that were out. Now we'll talk about the guys who actually played in this game. To the bench first. It was not the best bench performance, I will say. I said before, Wes Matthews played 5 minutes, didn't record a stat of any kind. He was fine, but didn't make a huge impact and did not play in the second half. That was fine with me. Trent Forrest, only 8 minutes because Dejounte had it going so much, and Dejounte played the whole third quarter and earned that. And they've essentially only played Trent when Dejounte's off the floor, which I'm totally fine with. And I thought Trent was fine. 2 points, had a rebound, ran the offense reasonably well, but certainly in this game in particular, the offense without Dejounte, even when he was on the court, unless it was him doing it, there wasn't much to say, and that was the case with him off the court as well. Garrison hit 2 threes, had 3 rebounds, 6 points, 3 fouls. I thought he played okay off the bench, nothing great. I will say Memphis seemingly game planned around Garrison a little bit. They were showing and flying at him at every opportunity, so that's kind of the scouting report on him in general, but that was notable to me in watching him off the ball a little bit. Bruno had 1 point in 21 minutes, but had 7 rebounds, 2 steals, good energy. I don't think he played incredibly well on offense by any means, but defensively, he gave some fits. I thought he gave good energy and rebounded the ball at a high level in this game. Hunter had kind of a weird one. He didn't start well, improved as the game went along, had 5 fouls, and was pretty overeager, I think, at times defensively. Had 12 points on 11 shots. Not great there, but that's okay. 2 assists, 2 rebounds. Not his best game, but also did not, sort of get panned either. He was fine. Vit Krejci, 22 minutes, 3 points, 5 assists. He's a good ball mover. It's something I've noticed, always know about Vit. He's a good passer. He's always been a good passer. I think his defense this year has been much improved. Granted, it's against the G League competition, but Vit's defense has always been kind of an adventure, and I think he's gotten a lot better and a lot more disciplined there playing College Park. The shooting is the big question on offense. Vit, he's only 1 of 4 from 3 in this game. I don't know if they're going to stay with Vit and doing this without Jalen for as long as Jalen is out, but it worked-ish today. He will at least move the ball. He had 2 steals. I've always liked Vit. I think defenses should just kind of play off him defensively, but he didn't kill them at all in this game. That was totally fine. That worked out the way they probably envisioned it working out in this one. The guy who plays the least on the starting lineup was Capela, who was kind of a tale of 2 halves for Clint. He was really rough in the first half, I thought. Like he had a hard time on Jackson to start the game. Something Quinn said post game, and he was right about that. Like usually, and he didn't say this plainly, but I'll say this plainly, it would have been Jalen defending Jaren Jackson. And if it wouldn't have been Jalen, it would have been Okongwu. Those are the 2 guys that you would say on Hawks roster are best equipped to defend Jaren Jackson. They had neither one of those guys. And then Jackson's playing center the whole time, which is not always playing center for Memphis, but he is in this game. So that left Bruno and Clint to guard him. In the first half, Clint struggled. He couldn't get a shoulder on him. Jaren's kind of getting where he wanted to go. After that, Clint was way better. And offensively in the first half, by the way, a couple of this is not a new story. It's very familiar, but Clint got a lot of offensive rebounds in the first half. And instead of kicking them out, he tried to finish, and they didn't work out very well. But after halftime, I thought he was like notably good. Ended up with 15 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, and it was plus 13. 5-5 at the free throw line. Didn't shoot well around the rim, obviously. I think he got blocked 3 or 4 times in this game on putback attempts. But I thought the second half, Clint was what you wanted. First half, he was pretty bad, honestly. But bounced back nicely in the second half. Sadiq had a really rough game. He was 1 of 12 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3. 3 points. Did have 9 rebounds and a steal and a block. He'd actually been really hot recently. He had the 3 games before this, he had shot 51% from the field and averaged 21 points a game. So I guess he was due for some regression, but not this bad. It was a rough one from Sadiq. At one point, again, I think he and Murray were like 0 of 12 from the field at one point in the first half. But it didn't kill them, and I thought he was at least able to give them some stuff. Still, though, the shooting it definitely hurt them a lot. I guess we'll talk about Murray. No, we'll go to Bogey first. Bogey, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks for Bogey in this game. Had 4 turnovers, plus 15. Man, I don't want to say it every time we do a podcast, but the plus minuses with Bogey on and off is just crazy. Like Bogey's on numbers this year have been really good, and they've struggled with him off the floor no matter who's playing. Trey, Dejounte, neither, etc. It's been kind of funny, but I thought Bogey gave them pretty good minutes at times, and this one hit 3 threes. Not his best. Not his worst, kind of a middling game on the whole. And then Dejounte. So I mentioned it earlier, I'll just go through it now. Like, they had no one that could stop Dejounte in this game. And he, I think, knew it and got to his spots all night long. He had not shot the ball well in the 3 previous games. He actually shot 38% from the field and 29% from 3 in the last 3 games before this. But obviously, that came to a screeching halt in this game as he made everything. He was 11 of 15 on 2s, 6 of 10 on 3s in the game, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He was 13 of 20 on jump shots. So, like, outside of 10 feet jump shots, 13 of 20, and that includes 3s. If you're going to do that, like, obviously, you're going to have a good night at the office. I pity to wonder, like, what would have happened if the Hawks offense, if Murray wasn't shooting the ball well in this game, but thankfully he was, and that's why they were able to get this win and score enough to at least be dangerous in this game. But yeah, it was great for Dejounte. I think he was probably better in that Minnesota game earlier in the year, if I had to guess. The other game we had 41 points, on the whole, but he was really good in this one. No question about that, and they had to have it. My friend Kevin Chenard of Hawks.com has been on this podcast before, hosted Video in 29. He kind of said it almost in jest in the first half. On Twitter, he was basically like, Dejounte's career high is 41, and he might have to have 41 again for them to win this game. And he kind of nailed it. I don't. Maybe they would have won if he had 39 or whatever, but like they kind of had to have Dejounte make all the shots that he made in this game to win it, and he did. So he was the big story on the positive side and doing his job. And look, I've said it before a lot in the last couple weeks, and I'll say it again now. It is a luxury to have someone like Dejounte Murray who can play point guard and do what he does without Trey. Doesn't mean they're better without Trey. They're obviously not. But having Dejounte be able to kind of carry usage and have these nights, and like, yeah, he wasn't great for the previous 3 games, but he can have a night like this. He's had several like this over the course of 2 seasons where he just kind of goes into the God mode as a mid-range shooter and 3-point shooter in this game with 6 threes. But he is hard to stop if he's making jump shots, and he was able to make jump shots in this game. All right, we'll leave it there for now on this contest, but certainly a nice win for Atlanta on the road here. From here, the Hawks come back home and play on Sunday, an early tip, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern time against New Orleans. And then after that, by the way, the Hawks will play at home for 2 weeks. So if you were interested in watching the Hawks in the hometown of Atlanta, your one chance in the next 2 weeks is at home on Sunday against New Orleans. The Pelicans are 38-25 this year. They are good. I don't think they'll be as banged up as the Grizzlies were, I should say, in this game. And they've won 3 in a row as of tonight. They actually won in Philly. So this is definitely the Hawks' most difficult test in a while. The last 5 games for Atlanta, really, I would say this. I'm looking at it now just to make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, this is the hardest game the Hawks have played post All-Star break on Sunday. Because you would say at the Knicks is harder than home for the Pelicans, and I would probably agree with you, but the Knicks didn't have Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle and OG Anunoby in that game. Provided the Pelicans are at reasonable health, the Hawks might be underdogs on Sunday. We'll see. But a nice little test, at the very least. And then the West Coast trip for 5 games after that. we'll talk about that more next week. All right, I'll sign off now. I'll just plug a few things before we get out of here. There is some bonus podcast content on the audio-only feeds from the hosts of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast. It's labeled as the postcast on the audio feed. So if you're a subscriber to our feeds on Apple or Spotify, you'll have that content for the price of $0. Just bonus stuff, no less from me, but just some extra stuff for your listening prowess. Also, please subscribe to the show across platforms: Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Cast, also on YouTube. Very importantly, ratings, reviews, likes, shares, all that stuff is very appreciated. Find a Hawks fan friend in your life and share the podcast with them if you are so inclined. Also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. I'm also on there at BT Rowland. I am relatively prolific talking about Hawks stuff on there if you want to follow me on Twitter. Also, I write about the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Also share some audio clips there from press conferences, etc. Just some extra Hawks stuff in addition to my writing and this podcast. But with all that said, this is kind of a sickos only episode because it's Friday night. Hawks play on Sunday. Not a lot of weekend listening. And obviously, this was kind of a rough game. But if you're listening this far, I do appreciate the diehard nature of your listening patterns. But thank you very much for listening as always. We'll have a show after the game on Sunday. And until then, we'll see you next time.